Welcome everybody to the Homeschool Plus conference. I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Mandi Sharkey. Mandi is a certified teacher in Alberta, Canada, and she's worked in public, private and off-reserve schools, all in special education settings. For the last 4 years, she's been homeschooling special learning needs with the aim of reintegrating them into any level of education or provide practical life skills for integration into the community. She holds a Master's in the Science of Teaching from SUNY Potsdam. Okay, I'd like to thank our sponsors and supporters, Homeschool Life, G3, and Home Education Magazine, and of course, Blackboard Collaborate. And if everybody would like to show us where they're from, if you see on the left-hand side of the whiteboard, there are tools. The second tool down is a star, a sun. So if you could click on that and show us where you're from in the world, and also write it in the chat box so we know who everybody is and where they're from, and any other relevant information. What time it is, where you are, what you do, what the weather's like, whatever you'd like to let us know about.
Okay, so hi everyone. From Alberta, Canada. I'm at the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. This is my first presentation, so please bear with me. And you'll probably hear the flipping of papers. It's probably because I'm very passionate about what I do, and I really don't want to get off topic. So this is my journey, homeschooling special learning needs. So if you heard the conversation with Maisie before, I don't actually have any kids of my own. I'm a certified teacher who's homeschooled other people's kids. So I was raised in Ontario in the public system, surprisingly enough. I'm not a native homeschooler, I guess. I graduated SUNY Potsdam, which is in New York, and I'm certified to teach in Alberta. And I have taught, as she said, in the public, private, and off-reserve schools. So off-reserve school is for natives here in Alberta, just in case, not sure. My teaching style, I really march to the beat of my own drummer, much like my students. And I believe in the students can understand how they're exceptional, that they need support and where they need support, and that they need to know that they're not alone. My kids get a kick out of the fact that I struggle with left and right, and if you see me, I wear a thumb ring on my left hand so I can tell the difference between my left and my right, and they really enjoy getting my goat, and it really makes them feel like they're not alone, that adults have to deal with these same issues that they do. So my ultimate goal is independence, and it can be any level of independence, whatever suits the child the best. If it's in a school environment, or just being able to solve minor problems on their own, or even if it's just knowing when to ask for help. So independence is the goal. So in case you guys don't know what you're looking at, this is chuck wagon racing. So July 2010 is when I began homeschooling. And my husband happened to be on the road that summer with the chuck wagons, and it's horse racing on the rodeo circuit. So we were all over Alberta and British Columbia. And then every time we came back to Calgary, I would kind of teach on the fly, and then we'd be out on the road again for the weekend. So it was an interesting start. I left the school that I was teaching at, was a private school here in Alberta that was dedicated to special learning needs. I was a lead teacher in a classroom of 24 kids, all IEP, but they were having financial difficulties. So the idea was fabulous, but the support and the money wasn't there. So we decided that, my husband and I decided that I could do this, just do it on my own, because I really didn't want to go back to being under another principal and take the chance that they weren't great. IEP or IPP is an individual education program or individual education plan. We now have a new acronym for it here in Alberta. It's now called an ISP, an individual service plan. So again, if I hit any of those acronyms, just let me know. A little bit about the system in Alberta, because I realize you guys are from all over the world, and even across Canada, there's a really big difference in how we homeschool. So we have aligned or fully aligned, which is 100% curriculum. It can be online or managed by a teacher, but the teacher doesn't have to be in your home. So basically, you're taking the curriculum home with you. And the province obviously rewards parents the best for that. You get about $1,500 a year support for online or fully aligned. Then we have blended, which can be half and half, 70-80, or 70-30, sorry, 80-20, whatever the parent chooses. And that one you get a little bit more funding for. It's between $900 and $1,500 a year, depending on what percentage. And it allows you some flexibility in some subjects, but dead on Alberta curriculum in the other ones. And then traditional homeschooling is, according to the homeschooling regulation, you just have to show progress between the beginning of the year and the end of the year. So homeschool coordinators here in Alberta typically look for writing, reading fluency, and sophistication in math concepts. And that you only get $825 a year. So you can tell which one the province really wants you to move towards. And then traditional is supported by a homeschool coordinator who will come and visit you 2 times a year to make sure that you're making that progress. So based on that, we had to go through the pros and cons to homeschool or not to homeschool. Again, mostly it was me, and then I had to present it to the parents that I teach for. So for me, really, the pro is flexibility. So when you have online or blended program, or even in the classroom, you cannot adjust a grade 2 developmental level at a grade 5 curriculum. So what I'm trying to say is, if you're in grade 5 and you're working on carrying in addition, then it's not really supported by online or a blended schooling approach. So that's one of the reasons why we picked traditional homeschooling, to get that flexibility. But in addition to that flexibility, they have more breaks, which is really key for special learning needs homeschoolers. It allows you to access services during the day instead of just waiting for the school to provide them. Our system in Calgary kind of discourages it because a lot of our services go through the school. So if you have SLP or OT, occupational therapy, or speech and language pathologists working with your students, they work through the school. So it can be difficult to access those, but there are services here to help you. Remediation becomes a lot easier, I think, in a homeschooling setting. So if you're looking just to bring up marks or certain skills, then homeschooling really is a plus. Individual learning styles and developmental norms. So not everybody is going to hit the developmental norms at the same time, and that's okay. But being homeschooled allows you to adjust for that. So if you need to encourage one skill to encourage that development a little bit more, then that lets you go ahead and do that. And this year will be our 2nd year with quote-unquote inclusive classrooms here in Alberta, and we're kind of working on what that needs to look like. It does have different levels of chaos in our classrooms at the moment and a lot of unhappy parents. But it really depends on your school and your division leadership. So each parent could see homeschooling a little bit differently. It can impact your general learning timeline, too, when you're in an inclusive classroom. Some things will suddenly take longer than teachers anticipated, or they'll just leave children behind with the special learning needs and hope that they have time to come back for that remediation. Not always possible. Access to services, I put on both as a pro and a con, because as I said earlier, a lot of our occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, is done through the school setting. So sometimes getting access to those services can be difficult. But because you're a homeschooler, you're in those off-peak hours. So behavioral assistance, psychological services, all of these things where people are struggling to fit in that 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. Time frame, it really becomes a more open world if you have any time of day to go ahead and schedule those services in. And you know your student the best, especially with our inclusive classrooms. It seems to be the biggest complaint is that teachers are not taking time to get to know the students. And really with special needs kids, they have a good radar for what adults are going to support them and what adults really don't have time or not personally interested in them. So by you knowing your student the best, it really works out well for homeschooling. On the con side, socialization really depends on your location and the availability of stuff in your community. It's not really a con anymore unless you don't go out and find what you need to look for. Coordinators can also be a hit and miss in this area. Some of them know and they're awesome, or some of them know about one disability and they're awesome with that one disability. But no board here in Alberta has a special needs coordinator on staff. And I don't really think it's a requirement, but I think it would be so helpful. The other thing is in Alberta, we don't keep track of how many kids are homeschooled because they have special learning needs. Once you become homeschooled, they kind of throw what we have here as coding. They throw it out the window and don't pay attention to it anymore. And I think those stats would really help them differentiate, I guess. The cost can also be a big impact. I know because I'm one of those costs, and sometimes psychological services, etc., can be a cost. But it depends on what you can manage. Each level is going to be different. 24/7 with your child can be a con if you don't have those other supports in place. And I leave this one to last because I'm not really sure if it's a con or not. Some families have great respite support and need that great respite support, and some special learning needs 24/7 with your child isn't as big a burden. So how we chose is because we have a wide range of needs, executive functioning disorders such as processing speed, working memory, ADHD, to disorders on the autism spectrum with high and mid-functioning students, to undefined habits or behaviors that are holding students back in a regular setting. We picked the traditional stream to give us the flexibility of meeting the kids where they're at. And I have a great coordinator. I've had her for the last 4 years, so she kind of understands what we're doing. It's been awesome. She doesn't know anything about special needs, but she's always willing to learn. So September 2011 is the beginning of our second year of homeschooling. My first year of homeschooling, I'm sad to say, really looked like a regular classroom. But coming from a regular classroom, I kind of had to bust out of that mindset and really figure out how my vision could fit the kids that I was working with. And so as you can see from the picture, we even did plain old worksheets with dry erase markers and stuff. Me thinking it was awesome, not realizing that I was stuck in that classroom mindset. By 2011, I'm also starting to transport students to make sure that we had more access to social experiences, and so there was less burden on the parents. We also began with our first big service project, which was working with In from the Cold, and that's a family homeless shelter here in Calgary. And we helped them out during the day by providing cupcakes for desserts, for helping clean, for helping sort out toys, for dropping off donations, whatever they needed. It was kind of a neat setup. So what does my day look like? Welcome to my Chevy pickup truck. It is a crew cab, so I can fit 5 other kids in there with me. And I drive about 150 kilometers a day, or about 100 miles. Actually, I think it's a little bit less than 100 miles. But I pick up my students in the morning because most of my families have kids who go to typical bricks and mortar schools as well as their special needs child. So I just try to ease the burden a little bit so that I can get them together and they can have that additional socialization. So I do have a group of early morning people. My day starts at 7:30 in the morning, picking up kids and bringing them together. And those are mostly my elementary kids. And as they start to shifting their schedule a little bit, they can end up in the afternoon class, where I have some middle schoolers, but mostly high schooler students. And then if students are working on something where they don't directly need me, I can plan and prep for the next student, so I try my best not to take work home with me. I think that there's less meltdowns with this system because I know where every kid is and I can see the crisis cycle as it's happening, so I can be aware of when they're, on the edge and ready to lose it, so I can redirect them or brain break, etc. I really think that that has a great impact. What does a kid's day look like? So you have to understand 2 things. Some of my students will be reintegrated into the regular system at their parents' request, and others will never go back, or will be reintegrated into the post-secondary or just an adult community. None of my students work at grade level in all subjects, so we're personalized and we're strategy-based. If my student is working on a skill at the grade 2 level in grade 5 or a grade 7 skill in grade 4, that's fine with me. We work on skills, applying strategies, managing workflow, time, social relationships. We use centers, group projects, personal interest projects. And where other students may learn skills by association with a larger project, like presentation skills, for example, I directly teach them and then give them an opportunity to apply them to their personal projects. So it's taken us a couple of years to get to this point, and the families that are working with me have been great to let me experiment with their children to find the right balance. So we have multiple skill levels working together because we found that that works the best and keeps them motivated. And we work on cool, larger projects. A big hurdle for us has been moving students past the learned helplessness, where the teacher gives them the answer in the regular system. It doesn't always happen, but some kids latch onto it and expect you to keep going. So a common question you'll hear in a kid's day at my location is, are you asking for help or a rescue? So if they're asking for the answer, we call it a rescue. And I always tell them, I'm willing to help you, but I'm not going to give you a rescue. So let's see, we learn about learning styles, multiple intelligences, and how to respect their own. And we start every school year with the same idea that they have smarts and they change, and we track. If I've had students more than 1 year, we track them, how they've changed. And then how to appropriately take a brain break, not just because you want to, but because you actually need it. We work on a lot of different strategies, and hands-on strategies and in pictures. So this is division, and I actually texted this to one of my students because I was at the next student's house, and he couldn't find his pictures of the strategies. So it works out well because we're 100% tech. Speaking of those directly teaching moments, I directly teach ordinary versus extraordinary, and you'll hear it as a self-check in the classroom too. Okay, before you give that to me, is that ordinary or extraordinary? And they go through, and we keep posters up of different things depending on what we're working on to show ordinary and extraordinary, so that each kid knows where they can push themselves. We're not holding all kids to the same standard. And then to help with negative voices or negative self-talk, we use the Worry Dragon program out of British Columbia, and we find that it works really well with the younger students. The older students have difficulty buying into the dragon part of it. We use multiple strategies until we find one that clicks with them. And as you saw, this is all writing and reading related. So whether it takes hands-on Play-Doh, rice, tray or actually building a sentence from scratch, then that's what we do to make it work. Here we don't actually use Worm. This happened to be a picture that was handy when I pulled this one up. So September 5th, we started using iPads, and I meet with my parents, all of them, the week before school starts to go over long-range plans and individual individual education plans. Sorry, they've changed the acronym on me. And when I did that, I suggested, hey, you know, I'd like to eventually go to iPads. And they were like, okay, let's do it. So, you know, within that 1 week of meeting with them and like 5 days later, everybody was 100% iPad. And the funny thing was is I didn't personally have an iPad. My husband has one because he has executive functioning issues and it's his lifesaver. And I have an iPhone and I have a MacBook, but I didn't have an iPad at the time. So it was kind of learn as you go, a little bit stressful to begin the year, but now we're 100% iPad and I wouldn't go back. I think the technology is great for these guys, and for my students, it makes them, for lack of a better term, look normal in a regular classroom. Nobody can tell that they have assistive tech on their iPad if other kids are using iPads too, right? So I think it really helps as an equalizer. My students can come up with their own topics, and they do have freedom to explore. There are a few months of the year at the beginning that I lead them through an area, a theme or an area for a month, and then as we go through that, so they learn the basics of, say, ecosystems or the solar system, and then I let them explore their own topic. That way I can direct teach some of the skills and then set them free so they can show me those skills. What does our tech look like? I'm very careful to try and take pictures without my kids' faces in them, so they're all looking down at their iPads. But what we were doing here is we were doing structures. So we went out into the city of Calgary and we took the train from one end to the other, the LRT here, and they stopped wherever they thought they saw a cool building or a cool building we could walk back to, and they were taking pictures and making notes. We chose one-to-one iPad for a reason. Some teachers and parents may want to hide from technology use, but as far as assistive technology goes, the tablet revolution is a fabulous equalizer. So being able to be a functioning online digital citizen, I think, is a requirement of the 21st century, and it really takes more strategies and time to learn this, especially if you're dealing with impulsivity, negative self-image, or social norms that are difficult to understand. So my kids get to practice in a safe place before we even consider letting them out onto Facebook or Instagram. And then there's the, like I said, the added bonus, whether they're reintegrated back in, most levels of school are using technology now. Any job that you look for now needs computers and tech problem solving. And can you imagine what your kids will need in 6, 3, 12, 18 years, depending on your age? And I know that it's a struggle now because my husband will avoid any job that has a computer in it because of his executive functioning issues. So I can't imagine forcing a child to quickly learn a brand new program, depending on their difficulties, just to handle a job. If we make sure that they're comfortable with technology beforehand, then learning that new program or the till or whatever uses the technology won't be as scary or difficult. Tinker is a program that we like to play with. It's learning to program, and it's programmed like a game. So they learn how to put tiles in to get the monster to move and do certain things, and they have a goal for each level. But I think it's great for logical thinking, planning, and organization. There are a few other ones out there like Tinker. My kids just happen to really like Tinker this year. Dropbox, and soon we'll be adding Google Drive because that's what most school boards in this area are using. Doesn't mean I agree with it, but I get that Dropbox takes a lot of bandwidth, but it's also that instantaneous. So if someone puts something there, as soon as it's loaded, everybody can see it. And that's great for kids who are like, oh, I forgot to do that, and then being able to put it up there. But it's also great for collaboration over distance. So if I'm dealing with a student here, I can have a student in Ontario, Lethbridge, internationally for all that matters, be able to give feedback on documents or create a survey that we can send out to more than just the kids in our classroom. So we're going to try our first Google Hangout this year, and we're going to be using KidBlog as well to connect with other students around Alberta and hopefully internationally. Notability is a sanity saver. This is what my husband relies on to keep him going. This means never lost paper again. Notability is a binder program. It's kind of like Evernote, but this one is cheaper. And the developers are awesomely responsive. I've emailed them a couple of times, and within days they've had an update out that fixes the problem that we've had an issue with. So I think this one really works well for us. It's easy to import and export individual notes. You can see scanned worksheets and such. So you can see on this side, these are my notes from ISTE this year, conference I went to in Atlanta, Georgia. And on this side, you can see where a worksheet has been scanned in, and they can write the answers on it, highlight it, draw pictures, whatever they need to make it work for them. OneNote is similar, Erica, but it's Microsoft-based. As you can see, I did a journal example, so I had photos. This photo had the words on it already. This one I wrote over it. This one, you know, I used the stylus and wrote again. And I've had one student reintegrated with his technology this year with a teacher who believed that she didn't have to do anything different. He was just like everybody else, and he should just do it like everybody else. But he went back in with this Notability program and his CAM scanner and a couple other programs I'm going to show you. And he advocated for himself. By the end of the year, he could bypass the teacher and go to the vice principal or his assistant and go, hey, I need this in a PDF form, or can I have a few minutes to take pictures of these notes because my teacher didn't provide them to me the way I needed them. So that he never lost a piece of paper, which I was really proud of him. Advocating for yourself in grade 7 can be a pretty daunting task. IWordQ. We use this to help writing because it reads back to you, and I don't know if you can really see it, but right here, as you're typing the word, it suggests other words that you could be trying to spell. Let me tell you, IWordQ makes my husband's text make sense, where you had to be a teacher to read them before to figure out what he was spelling. So I find this one really cool, also Canadian, and their developers are really responsible for making changes really quick when we ask them questions and stuff. You can cut and paste into here, cut and paste out of here. You can actually send text directly from here. It'll send it to the message program, etc. So it's pretty well integrated. So these are some of the other programs we use. We use Edmodo, as you can see here, Kobo, Khan Academy. KidBlog is something we're starting this year. This one is TouchCast. It kind of creates a CNN broadcast, so kids can create, you know, the video background, whatever information they want to give, and then they can have side panels where people can actually click, and it'll take them to other videos or other pieces of information. So that extra stuff that they find that they think is really cool that they didn't have a place or a time to incorporate into the main project. So it's kind of a neat presentation to do. So this past year, we went to our theme project, but we also had a community service project that didn't really work out this year. That's okay. The kids actually got to see that it didn't work out, which I thought was pretty important. And we thought it through. We brainstormed how to make it better this year. I also think it's important that my kids do a service project every year because they tend to get a lot of services from agencies and the government, and I think they need to know that they have something to give back. So we try to do a service project every year. Sorry. Larger projects that we have worked on. So these are both for my graduating students this year. In Alberta, if you don't write the diploma exams, which I think are dumb, you don't get to graduate. So instead of graduating, she has what we call a certificate of completion here in Alberta, which shows she at least attended school until she was 18. So she had her graduation this year, and she had her dinner at the Calgary Zoo, which was pretty important, and she invited all the students. So we had students there from 6 years old to 18 years old helping her celebrate. But on this side, you'll see they have all the different cupcakes, and those are lemon meringue tarts. I know they're blue, but they're lemon meringue tarts. We all worked together on Sarah's idea to build a cookie shop. So at Christmas we did cookies, and they went through cookie recipes. They discussed allergies and dietary restrictions and what people generally liked because they didn't want to pick something too wacky or wild. They figured out 5 different recipes of cookies. We tested them, and then we learned some of them should have been tested in double batches. So they saw that learning process, and we sent it out to all of my contacts, and then their family sent it out from there to their families, and we had all the orders come back. So Sarah then learned how to make a spreadsheet, which would help her keep track of all the information, and we had different delivery dates. And then we aimed for breaking even with our costs, so it was one giant math problem for them, or a consistently ongoing math problem, because even when we went to Bulk Barn or Walmart, they had to figure out if the sale price fit what they needed it to fit in the budget. We overcompensated a little bit though, so with our extra funds, they voted to donate them to the Calgary Zoo. An example of other community service projects, we've worked with In From the Cold, we've worked with the Turner Valley Food Bank, which is just outside the city of Calgary, because the large one in Calgary won't let kids in who are less than 12 years old for insurance reasons. We have helped out with younger kid classrooms, so classrooms where they would feel confident, grade 1, 2, 3 level. What else have we done? I think that's it as well. We worked with In From the Cold for 2 years, so it was kind of cool working with them. One of the other things we did with In From the Cold for a community service project or a larger project is they gathered bottles. We went around their communities to gather bottles, because here in Alberta you get a deposit back for them. So once they got the deposit back, what we did is we took all that money and we went to Michael's and the dollar store, and we found all kinds of things that they thought the kids would really enjoy doing, art projects, drawing things and stuff. And then we put them in individual baggies, so the volunteers who work at night at the In From the Cold Center could just grab a baggie and go do an activity with a kid. So that took a lot of time, but they were really proud of themselves when they were done that project. So I just want to go through the tips and tools for parents. We call them toolboxes when I talk to parents about it. So dealing with special needs kids day in and day out can lead to burnout. So you really have to consider you or your spouse's well-being and the programs that are available in your community before you make the decision to homeschool or 100% homeschool by yourself. I live with executive functioning needs every day in the form of my fabulous husband, and I still struggle. Even though I teach them, I still struggle to remember that as much as I am his walking memory bank, that takes a lot extra out of me. And I have to remember to give myself respite as well. So you have to make sure that you can balance that before you decide to homeschool a special learning needs kid. I think in every parent's toolbox should be your coordinator or homeschool supervisor's phone number and email. They're going to be your best ally, and if they're not, find a new one. Boards always have more than one. You're not stuck with the one that they give you. If you have social services or human services support, so in Alberta we have FSCD or Family Services for Children with Disabilities. You need their number or your worker's number on hand. although in Alberta they don't deal with educational issues, they do deal with the occupational therapy, physical therapy, psych support, respite care, access to community programs, including helping you fund those. So it can be a really important phone number to have. And if you're reintegrating or have a blended program, you probably want your school's contact information on hand as well. So for us, if we're reintegrating a student, we start in March to reintegrate them for September. Just because of most of their needs. They need that transition time. They need to know what to expect. They need to meet a multitude of teachers, depending on what grade they're going into. They need to learn the system, what it's like to have a locker, what it's like to not have recess anymore. So as you can tell, most of my kids are reintegrated into middle school. And what it's like to change classrooms and keep track of all your stuff. So I think that's pretty important process if you're going to go through it. Not everyone does. Once you have all those phone numbers, it's a matter of talking to everybody regularly. Don't be afraid to ask questions, ask about programs, because programs change all the time. There may be something new that's come into your market that you're not aware of. Or you can seek out programs yourself. I have discovered there's a couple of different homeschooling groups online here in Calgary, Facebook or Twitter, that that help me find really cool different things that I can do with my kids. I also keep the local Learning Disability Association Facebook on my news feed because I think they're a reliable source of just extra tips and tools, but they're also good for defining vocabulary for people and 10 things you need to know about this disorder and 5 common myths about this disorder. So, you know, that wealth of information can come in handy. And it may be hit and miss, but don't give up on that feed. Eventually something will come up. I also follow the National Center for Learning Disabilities in the U.S., and I find they have a lot of free stuff that's really good to help explain disabilities to other people. After that, it becomes your child's toolbox. Do you remember when you're homeschooling that one day will not look like the next, especially with special learning needs? Their needs change from day to day. They may remember what they learned yesterday, they may not. They may have a great day today, they may not. They may have slept last night, they may not have not. So all of those maybe become a part of your kid's toolbox and teaching them how to deal with it no matter what is going on with them. So what I think should go in a student's toolbox is learning how to use a fiddle toy. Something as simple as don't bang it on the table if there are other people around you. As simple as if you're starting to build a creature out of your silly putty or your thinking putty, perhaps that's not the fiddle toy for you. You know, so those skills that other kids, you know, would get in trouble for and catch on to, they really kind of need to be taught that directly. They also need to know when to walk away. When frustration, a little bit of frustration is okay, but if you're pushing yourself over the edge every time, then you need to regroup. And sometimes it's not even walking away. Sometimes it's just switching tasks. And it's a slow lesson to learn, but they eventually learn to manage themselves. How to organize in different ways to meet their learning styles the best. Again, it will depend on the student, and sometimes they will always need to be directed towards what they're best at, but most kids will figure out, hey, I'm good at this, and want to make sure that they use that strategy all the time. Being mindful of others and themselves can be a lesson that we expect people to figure out in a regular classroom, but as a homeschooler, you have the flexibility to say, hey, when someone treats you like this, this is the proper response. Or you have something happen in a community group or on the playground, you can then, you know, role play and reinforce what you saw. Whereas the regular classroom doesn't have time to take each kid aside and go, okay, so this is what happened and this is what should have happened, or this is what happened and how can we deal with it next time. So there's that advantage for special needs homeschoolers that's fabulous. I think that kind of outweighs a lot of the other stuff. They also need to know personally a strategy where to find math, reading, or writing help, whether they have a website they know they can go to or a person they know they can go to, how to ask questions so that they get an answer, not, I don't know how to do this. Because if they're reintegrated into a classroom, or even as an adult standing on a corner looking for a particular location, if you go, I can't find this, it's not specific enough for a random passerby to be able to help you, or a classroom teacher to have the time to help you. They also need to know what strategies work best for their brain when they're learning something new, how to deal with anxieties, especially related to teachers and adults. Like I said before, special needs kids have good radar. They know when a teacher's there to help them or when the teacher just doesn't have time. So these are the tools I think they need to put in their kid toolboxes. Some of them they're expected to learn by osmosis in the regular classroom, and developmentally they may not be ready. That's where homeschooling comes in very handy. I just want to promote them being independent, so that's why we work on a strategy-based formula. So my journey continues from the beginning when I was learning and deciding where to go and embracing traditional homeschooling as it best fits for my students. And I want to continue this journey. Ultimately, I'd like to set up a school that runs on the idea of traditional homeschooling so that people with special learning needs have a central place to come to, that allows personalized learning, that allows flexibility and developmentally appropriate strategies that can be advocated for and applied in any learning setting. So I'm going to continue to learn from others and work with others and basically spread knowledge to families. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't charge them for every single phone call and every single email and every single text. I'm here to share information, and I find some teachers hoard information, and I don't want to be that one. I want to make sure that everyone gets their resources where they need to, and hopefully my journey has helped you on yours, or can in the future help you on your journey to homeschooling. So if there's any questions.
If people want to ask questions, I can give you microphone right. So you put your hand up. Your hand is just below your name. There are 4 tools. The third one from the left is your hand. Is a hand. So if you put it up, I can give you the microphone. Anybody questions?
Erica, we're also running Master the iPad for the classroom because I'm tired of kids being sent to school with assistive tech and then nobody helping them. So we'll have some of those instructional videos too. So if any of your girls are looking for that, I can post the videos too once they're done. They still need to be edited. I have taught as many as 22. I used to tutor after schools as well and help kids with special learning needs who were stuck in the regular school setting. So I've been as high as 22, but this year I only have 8. I'm tired of working 7 days a week, so I've removed most of my tutoring students and down to just homeschooling students in Alberta.
Brian, you can ask your question if you want.
Also, my students, just to keep going along, my students range from age 6 to age, this year will be 19. So one student, we're keeping her an extra year, because in Alberta you're not allowed to go to school till you're 21. So we're going to keep her for an extra year and get her ready for post-secondary. She won't get a diploma like everybody else, but she still wants to attend and learn and stuff like that. Online teaching methods for students. Mostly my online methods are flipped learning. So I will give them a video, etc., or a website that allows them to practice their skills, and then come into the classroom and we'll work through any problems. It depends on the student. Most of my students are not independent enough to do online schooling yet without someone standing by. There's a lot of anxiety. So some of my older students that I've had in the past, their parents wanted them on online schooling, and without me sitting there to poke and prod them, they just didn't get anything done. So I don't really use like Classflow or the other one, Canvas, or any of those for online teaching. My kids are totally allowed to text each other. I use Voxer and Twitter and Facebook, but I don't put my students on Facebook until their parents are confident. We do use Edmodo, so it's like a walled garden Facebook to keep them protected and allow them to learn. And like I said, this year we'll be using KidBlog. That one will be a new one for us, but it's also a walled garden online environment for you.
Anybody else got a question?
Thank you very much.
It was an amazing presentation. You gave us a lot of information. Thank you very, very much. I really enjoyed it.
I was afraid that there wouldn't be enough, so that worked out well.
Yes, it did. If there are no more questions, I'm going to stop the recording. Yes, we do have a lot to think about. Really, really excellent. Thank you very much.